Chapter 2, Tractate Psachim, is continuation with three new subjects. Number one, it's Isur Hana'ah, driving joy on Passover. Number two, it's the Bi'ur Chametz, the exact time of getting rid of Chametz. And number three, at the very end of this chapter, it's Achilat Matzah, the idea of eating matzah. The first part in this chapter dealing with deriving Hana'ah, driving joy. There are three different texts in the Torah that apply to the Isur Hana'ah, deriving joy. One, Book of Shmot, Exodus chapter 12, Shiv'at Yamim, 7 days you shall eat matzot. Ach bayom hashvi'i, yet the first day, tashbitu, you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, venichreta. The second one is Dvarim, Deuteronomy chapter 16, you shall eat no leavened bread with it, etc. And then the last source, it's again the Shmot chapter 12, and they shall eat the meat on that night, roast with fire, and matzot with bitter herbs, they shall eat it. So you see here three different concepts. We explain that we have the prohibition against possessing chametz on Pesach. There is a separate prohibition, Isur Hana'ah, deriving benefit on Pesach. There is a great book, scholarly book, called Ktsot HaChoshen, that he made a big chakira, big research, what exactly the Torah meant when they speak about Isur Hana'ah, the prohibition of driving benefit. The book called Minchat Chinuch, which again it's a research at depth in many subjects. One of them is the idea of the mitzvah tashbitu, tashbitu meaning the Torah said that you should annul, you should nullify, you should remove any chametz. He dig in and explains that the mitzvah of tashbitu, of nullify, it's not only chametz. Sometimes you have to go an extra mile, which is, if you do not have any chametz, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of leva'el, to nullify, to get rid, do you have the obligation to purchase chametz before Pesach in order to get rid of chametz or not? It's part of his research as a result of this discussion. So, before we go to the Mishnah, chapter 2, page 21, we have to remember that since the previous discussion was how late we can eat chametz in the eve of Passover, now we ask a question, how late can we derive benefit? Again, point of reminder, this followed the Rabban Gamliel point of view that said that the Kohen have the 5th hour, because remember the Kohen involved with all the preparations, versus the Israel, our fellow Israel, that they have up to the 4th hour. Now we go to the Mishnah. The Tzlach have here a discussion why it was the term Sha'ah and not Zman, but the Mishnah again it's on page 21a, Tractate Psachim. כל שעה שמותר לאכול, מכיל לבהמה, לחיה ולעופות, ומוכר לנוכרי ומותר בהנאתו. The Meiri explained to us that the Mishnah said for the entire time that it is permitted to eat, he can go ahead and also feed his animal. And the Mishnah go further to say that he can go to all different type of animal. They said chaya, they said ofot, which is domesticated animal, non-domesticated animals, and bird. So here we see as three different school of thought. One is the Meiri, that said that when you feed your Cyrus, your dog, you have hana'a, you have joy out of that, because you also responsible, especially in this country, people with loving animal understand it, that you are responsible to feed animals. That's part of your obligation. You purchase or you accepted that animal, then you're responsible to feed it. Now, Rabbeinu David and the Ran said that it's not apply only to your animal. Ask Linda, she will tell you. That's apply also deriving joy by feeding other people's animals. So the code in Orach Chaim Taf Mem Chet 448 said that this prohibition against feeding animals with leaven on Pesach apply not only on your animal, but also if you are out in the field, that those animals are totally ownerless, you still are forbidden, the Magen Avraham said, to feed those animals on Pesach. So the Gemarrah explained that that's not because of the prohibition of lo ye'achel. You should not involve with any form of joy and eating that. It's only specifically because the Torah repeats it so many times. It used the term in singular, ye'achel, meaning you are forbidden to cause any animals, the Vilna Gaon said, even ownerless animals, to eat leaven. Meaning, what they do independently is their way of doing it. But you cannot, the Gemarrah said, initiate that. Now, Rashi explains that when the Mishnah used the term or the entire time that you can go ahead and eat chametz, then you can also feed your domesticated, not domesticated bird, all these animals, and also umocher lenochri, you can go ahead and sell that leaven to a non-Jew, umotar behana'ato. So later the Gemarrah explain what's the idea of deriving joy, what exactly, etc. Avar zmano. In Judaism, as you know, the time management is crucial. So if the time of eating chametz passed, asur behana'ato, you are forbidden to derive any joy from it. Velo yasik bo tanur vechiraim. Therefore, you are not allowed to even light an oven or a stove with leavened bread. So it means that Rashi explained that it's not only lighting stoves, etc. It's just an example. In those days, in ancient time, they have a large stove, so that's apply if it's very large on the bottom and the top it's short, looks like a bottle, but that's the way they used to do those ancient stoves. So it's a prohibition to go ahead and when the time of eating chametz passed, you cannot even do that. So there is a big discussion what happens if it's already on the border time, if you can derive joy, not derive joy. The Tosfot here and others have a big discussions, but the key point is the minutes the time pass, you cannot derive joy. Now the last part of the Mishnah, dealing with bi'ur chametz. As we said earlier, The Torah said in Exodus, in Shmot, chapter 12, Ach bayom harishon, tashbitu seor mibatechem. Remember, this word is very important, tashbitu. Tashbitu meaning you should nullify. Ach bayom harishon, specifically at the first day, you shall nullify any leaven from your meats. Since they said it in such a way, so now you see a disputation between Rabbi Yehuda and the sages. Rabbi Yehuda omer en bi'ur chametz ela sreifa. The only way to get rid of chametz is to do what? To burn it. Now, what does that mean, burning it? Does that mean at the 6 hours? It's passing the 6 hour. It's a long discussion. They have Tosfot, they have Rabbenu Tam, they have the Ktsot, they have the Minchat Chinuch. It's a big discussion in the early and the late sages. What exactly involved at that time border? If you look in a luach, in the calendars, they give you a time frame, and we said many times, all this time management, even not only in Pesach, even lighting candles, we always ask people to go even earlier than that, because that time frame, it's a very sensitive case, it's a very sensitive time. So Rabbi Yehuda said, doing mitzvah of bi'ur, actively tashbitu, actively getting rid of chametz, apply solely by burning it. The sages said, is another option to do what? אף מפרר וזורע לרוח או מטיל לים. Even you can crumble it and throw it into the wind or cast it into the sea. Now, the Mekor Chaim said, the key point is you're getting rid of that. So if you put it in the air, and now we're in a season of a lot of hurricanes, a lot of winds, you put it in the air, goodbye. You put it in the sea, goodbye. But if you look scrupulously at the wording of the Mishnah, they use the word af. What does that mean, af? Af meaning you can do also. So what we understand from the sages, there is lechatchila and there is bediavad. Lechatchila, the sages agree with Rabbi Yehuda that the way that we prefer, that you advise, that you wish, is to burn it. But if you cannot burn it, then the Bach said, or Achaim Tafmemhei said, the Rif, etc. said, then you go to that options. Some additional point, take for example Shabbat that occurred on Pesach. So you cannot burn the chametz on Erev Pesach because it is Shabbat. So therefore you can go ahead and, if you cannot finish the chametz, which happens sometimes, you buy too much or you have too much left over, so what you do, you have to get rid of that. So you crumble it and you put it out and goodbye. Now, the Rosh and the Rif said, do not have the girsa, do not have the word af here, because if it's Shabbat, so what other option you have? You cannot burn it. But as we said, there are those who said that the sages said that it's advisable and preferable to burn it, but there are those who say that the af, it's not part of the discussion. So,
but the sages aren't concerned that someone will come to carry chametz on Shabbat to dispose of it either into the sea. I mean, because then it's into a Carmelite, so isn't that so then moving from one domain to another?
Very good question. The Magen Avraham in Taf Mem Hey in the code said that the sages forbidden to burn chametz because the mitzvah, according to them, it's not burning it, because that's indirectly sometimes isur hana'ah, because there is a way to derive joy. I'll give you an example. The Gemarrah said if you bury a body, you cannot go ahead and use the ashes if it happens that there's ashes involved, because there is a prohibition to derive a joy. So the Gemarrah in Tumurah in page 34 said that deriving any type of joy from the ashes is forbidden. So therefore what we said here, that in that avenue they totally not involved in any form of forbidden. So what we wrap it up is as follows. Rabbi Yehuda said that the only way is to burn.
Right.
The sages have three schools of thought. One school of thought said it's applied to bediavad, which means lechatchila you should burn it, the same as Rabbi Yehuda. Is another school of thought said that it's not involved in af, like the reef, the rosh. They say that that's applied only, as an example, Erev Pesach beShabbat, so you have no other choice. Or you go by the Magen Avraham that tells us that they are totally forbids burning, and they just go by the other two. Back to our subject. So you see here that in the Mishnah we speaks about Isurei Hana'ah, deriving joy. So the Gemarrah asked, and they said, Kol sha'a shemutar le'echol ma'achil. What did the Mishnah tells us? That the entire time that is permitted to eat leavened bread, one may feed it to his animal. So, ha kol sha'a, what we understand, she'eno mutar eino ma'achil. Because if you pass the time that you can feed your animal, you are also forbidden to derive joy. Leima matnitin delo keRabbi Yehuda. So, do we say that this Mishnah did not follow Rabbi Yehuda? Because he said, and this is again, remember what the rules. The rules is, if you tell me that I'm forbidden to eat chametz, that's apply also the prohibition of deriving joy or not. So, if you remember, we have this machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir
during the 5th, 6th hour.
Right. So here the Mishnah said, the Tosfot tells us that it's going by Rabbi Meir, the Rabbi Yehuda. If you tell me that that's follow Rabbi Yehuda, ha'ika chamesh. We have the 5th hour, the eino ochel u'ma'achil, that you cannot eat, but you can have your animal and you can feed them. Ditnan. Now we refresh our memory. We go back to what we study on page 11b. Rabbi Meir omer, אוכלים כל 5 ושורפים בתחילת 6. Rabbi Meir tells us that you can eat at the entire 5th hour, and then earlier, the 6th hour, you should burn it. And just remember that we speak here in the Sha'ot Zmaniyot, which means those hours every single day change by the time frame. Rabbi Yehuda אומר, אוכלים כל 4 ותולים כל 5 ושורפים בתחילת 6. He said you have 3 different time when it's involved Erev Pesach. And again, Judaism time management is crucial. He says all the 4th hour, fine, you can go ahead and eat. And again, we talk Israel, a regular fellow. 5th hour, it's in between time, which means you do not burn it, but you don't eat it either. And that apply the 5th hour. So what do you do now? Now you're on the 5th hour. You cannot burn it, cannot eat it. So what do? You can feed your animals. Now.
So the only difference between them is Rabbi Yehuda basically says you can't eat it during the 5th hour.
Correct.
You can still derive benefit from it, but you can't eat it.
Correct.
Right.
And the Griza Levi explains, and also they follow the Pnei Yoshua, say that that's specifically we zooming in the issue with animals at the 1st hour. That's the whole key point in the machloket. ושורפין בתחילת שש. We should burn when? At the early part of the 6 hours. And again, listen carefully at the language, בתחילת, at the early side, part of the 6 hours.
Right at the start of the 6 hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, now, when you're saying the early part of the 6 hour, meaning you are, by everyone, forbidden to feed your animal, right? And it's all rabbinic, because if you go biblically, the 6 hour, you are still allowed to eat chametz.
So the end of the 6 hours, essentially, well, let's see, the end of the 6 hours is chatzot, right? Correct?
In sha'ot zmaniyot, each day it's different.
But,
Yes.
right, but it's chatzot. I mean,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
So, what we derive from that? Rabbi Yehuda go ahead and said that in the 5th hour, you can feed your animal, but you cannot eat chametz at the 5th hour. So, what do you say? That this Mishnah go by whom? Rabbi Meir. Because he forbids achilat chametz from what? From the 6th hour. The Gemarrah rejected it and said, Ve'ela mai, what are you saying? Rabbi Meir here. That the Mishnah follow the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Hai kol sha'a shemutar le'echol ma'achil. Why the Mishnah used the language all the time, the entire time that you're allowed to eat, you can feed as well? Kol sha'a she'ochel ma'achil. You have to say what? For the entire time that one eats leavened bread, he may feed. Which means, it's like the Mishnah speaks here about two different people. As long as Mr. A, let's call him Reuven, as long as Reuven allowed to eat chametz, Shimon, someone else that is forbidden to eat chametz at that hour, he can feed the animals. So, meaning the Mishnah is not follow Rabbi Meir, because according to Rabbi Meir, until the 6th hour, the chametz, the leaven, allow to every single one, and from that point is forbidden to derive benefit. So Amar Rabba bar Ula, matnitin Rabban Gamliel hi. You have to go by the opinion of Rabban Gamliel, and what we are studying now, it's crucial to understand the whole sugya. So please zoom in with me. Rabban Gamliel Omer, חולין נאכלין כל 4, תרומה כל 5, ושורפין בתחילת 6. Rabban Gamliel said, non-sacred, which is chulin, leavened bread, may be eaten on the 14th of Nisan during the entire 4th hour. Leavened bread that is truma may be eaten during the entire 5th hour. And one burns the leavened bread at the beginning of the 6th hour. So why? Rashi explains in the page 11b. He said that many people can misconstrue between the 6th and the 7th hour, and then they enter the biblical violation. V'hachei ka'amar, and this is what the Mishnah is saying. Kol sha'a shemutar le'echol kohen bitruma, as long as the kohen allowed to eat sacred sacred chametz, leavened bread, which is the 5th hour, Yisrael ma'achil chulin lebema chayav ha'ov. At that period of time that the kohen is now in a different category, which is the 5th hour, he can eat teruma of chametz. Israel that is now forbidden to eat chametz, yet he can use this non-sacred chametz, leavened bread, to feed his domesticated, non-domesticated, and bird.
Isn't that basically what Rabbi Yehuda said, other than the Kohen being able to truma, right? That's the only... So,
yes. So now the Mishnah said, Lama li lemitna behema, lama li lemitna chaya. So why do we need the Mishnah to tell us that domesticated animal, and why do I need to teach about non-domesticated animal as well? We always try to be succinct, brief, so you can make one of those animals and you derive all the other species of animal from that specific to each and every one of them. So the Gemarrah responds and said, Tzricha, you need to know both. Why? The Tana Behema, if you tell me that that's applied to animal, only the Behema, only the animal you're allowed to have chametz, 11 bread, the 14th, the Im Meshaira Chazele, that if it hides, so what did he do? He sees that chametz and he nullified it. Why? Because let's face it, those of you who own animals know, animals are not hidden their food. They have it, they eat it, period. What is called that movie that what is named Linda said that Life of Pi, what is called that?
Oh, I think so, yeah. I never saw it, so
it's about the guy in India that anyway, so these animals put the food in front of them. It's not, they don't hide it. Aval chaya, but the other animal, which is non-domesticated animal,
wild animals, yeah.
For example, cat. For example, all these non-domesticated, the imeshaira kametzan ale, whatever left, they hide it.
Like squirrels. Yeah, they squirrels.
So you may say, wait a second, let's divide it between the animals. This type of animal you cannot give 11 because he is going to hide it, and now I do not see it, and how in the world I'll be able to nullify something that I don't see. And you remember that we said the Torah is very clear and saying lo yimatzeh, you shall not have it in your meat. So therefore, if that animal hiding the food, you are in violation. So they said the itana. So that's the reason why you need to go to the specific of all the list: domesticated, non-domesticated, bird, etc. The itana chaya. But if the Tana use the word only chaya, domesticated animal, so we understand that that's only chaya. You can give chametz, leavened bread at the eve of Pesach. Mishum de imeshaira mihad kamitzna. So if that domesticated animal leaves some leaven, you are in violation of bal yera'eh. You should not see it. And he said, aval behema zimnin de mishaira velo masika da'atei. Let's face it, you don't always pay attention to what's going on with the animals. So if you have a case of non-domesticated animal, so you may thinking that it's permitted to feed leavened bread to such an animal because they leave over any food in any case. So v'ka'alei beval yira'eh u'beval yematzeh. You remember the Torah said it in two different terms. One, they said you shall not be seen and it shall not be found. Eimalo, you may think that you shall not bring chametz. So if we said only chaya, so we may think that only chaya specifically you can bring the chametz, but not the others. And if the others, non-domesticated, you think the same. Tzricha, so therefore, you have to go both. So Rashi here tells us that you can derive from that something very important. That it's the nullification, that it's biblical. It's so important that it's applied even the chametz that you're not aware of. Because here when you talk about specific domesticated, non-domesticated animals, etc., birds, you're talking about hidden from your eyes or something that you're not aware of. And again, tashbitu apply in any form. That's, you see again and again how the form of declaration of nullification is crucial not to enter the violation.
What's the difference between ofot and tziporim? Is there a difference? Is it domesticated
yes,
versus?
I don't know if you know, but one of the beautiful minhag, you see it in some prayer book, is to say perek shira, to say the song of the animals that apply to each of them. It's a big discussion which will dedicate some lecture, why it's a song of animals, how animals sings, etc., etc. But there are different species. So when you talk about off, for example, you talk about eagle, you talk about something that fly.
Okay.
When you say, what's the other?
Tzipor.
Tzipor, it can be a, for example, a bird. In a sense, you can say that bird is off. Off meaning ofef, to fly.
Okay.
But you have a different category. You watch the movie The Penguin?
Oh, I didn't.
All right.
But yeah,
so you see a bird
like a penguin, which is
that go under the water and go above the water. Can be a fish and can be a flying animal, right? When you use the word tzipor, is a specific bird. It's how do you say it? It can be a subcategory, but we treated it here in a separate way because you have to remember that the manners of those animals, in a sense of eating, it's very different from one to another.
If you're talking about generally tziporim, the small birds.
Tziporim, it's usually a small bird.
Okay.
Okay. So again, when Linda sent me that trailer of that movie, something with pi, P-I.
Yeah, Life of Pi, I think it was.
Life of Pi. It's showing that trailer that the certain animals don't touch other animals, and certain animals follow reflection, and certain animals do not involve, for example, with eating or touching or anything with human or certain. Each animal have their own manners. So, ofot lamali, why do you need in the Mishnah to mention bird as well? Because if you tell me that you can feed with chametz, with leavened bread, domesticated and non-domesticated, for sure you can give it to a bird. So, aide de tane, be'ema v'chaya, tane name ofot. They said, since the Mishnah taught the cases of domesticated animal, the non-domesticated animal, so you use the term bird because normally it's like one single group, one single category. So they want to make sure that that's applied only, not only to walking animal on the ground, can apply to other subcategory or similar category of animals. And basically, as we know, animals guided by reflection more than involvement or with a intelligent, in a sense of brain. It's more the brain is more related to reflection. So therefore, we should not differentiate in that sense between birds and domesticated or non-domesticated animals. And the next part of the Mishnah said that one may also sell it to a non-Jew, because the prohibition of chametz apply biblically only to the fellow Jew. So they said pshita, it's obvious that you can sell it to a non-Jew from that hour, because we said earlier you can feed your animal, so you can derive any type of joy. So they said apukei mehaitana de Tanya. We want to derive from the Tana that said as follows: Bet Shammai omrim לא ימכור אדם חמץ לנוכרי, אלא אם כן יודע בו שיכלה קודם הפסח. בית שמאי go in an extreme strict way. And they said, ביעור מהעולם, to get rid of the chametz from this world, applies so far that even something left over on the time of Pesach, because they go and said, come on, the Torah said tashbitu in any form, goodbye, you have to get rid of that. Any form of having existence of chametz during Pesach, period. So in other words, if you know, Beit Shammai said that the non-Jew is going to eat it before Pesach, even at the time border that you are not allowed, that's fine. Otherwise, it's a problem. The Kovetz Shiurim have a long discussion when and where and how you are forbidden. But the key point is Beit Shammai speaking rabbinically or biblically? The Maram Chalawa, Ritva, Aran, Rabbeinu David, they all try to say that here, this point, Beit Shammai said no, Tashbih to apply, to take it out of your domain. The rest said that the Beit Shammai here goes by the rabbinics. So again, you have to dig in and understand what exactly Beit Shammai speaks and how far they are. בית הלל אומרים כל שעה שמותר לאכול מותר למכור. They said, wait a second, you do not have to get rid of the chametz totally from this world. So if you have a whiskey which is chametz, you don't, it have a value, so you don't, Beit Hillel said you don't need to get rid of the entire product. You fulfill the mitzvah of tashbitu, the Rosh said, following Beit Hillel teaching, by what? By selling it to a non-Jew. So the non-Jew can have this bottle of whiskey, and you do not have to, you don't have to spill it out.
It's interesting that just the Shammai's view is essentially you're holding to the Torah law in the hands of a non-Jew. Which would seem to be a problem to me. I mean,
correct. Did you ever read the Hammurabi Code, the ancient the Hammurabi Code, which is right at the time of Mesopotamia? So they said it was the Akkadian that follow some of the Akkadians that follow that code of Hammurabi, the Sargon, the first one. They speak about 282 rules that take the text they made literally. So eye for eye, eye for eye.
Right.
All kind of rules. So it's a very much resonant, that meaning that tashbitu, you can get rid of everything. You don't leave anything in any form.
Right.
You know, he's a great rabbi in Baltimore. His name is Rabbi, I forgot his name. Anyway, he is in a Aguda in what is called that street? Not Park Heights, other place. Anyway, he has a form of selling chametz that's very different than any other rabbani. He goes to the location, the specifications, and the values, and the declarations. He goes in such a way that the selling of chametz carries a very extreme, scrupulous meaning. So it's totally not any type of game, because people otherwise take the whole selling of chametz as a joke.
Right. Absolutely.
We just turned the page, 21b. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteira אומר, כותח וכל מיני כותח אסור למכור 30 יום קודם לפסח. He said that kutach is a specific Babylon that have this leaven bread crumbs, and v'chol minei kutach, and any type of kutach that carries chametz, so you can combine it with milk, with salt. So you cannot sell it to a non-Jew up to 30 days before Passover. Why? Kutach is spicy. People use only a bit at a time, so it's likely to survive until Pesach. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitera, Rashi said, hold the same as Beit Shammai, that you cannot sell the chametz to a non-Jew only with condition that you know that they're going to agree with that before Pesach. Now, so why 30 days? Remember we said that we discussed the law of Pesach 30 days before the holidays. Now, you have here a long discussion. I wish to have the time of Tosfot, of the Rabbeinu David, Maram Chilawa, Bach, more and more. What exactly involved? What's the difference between Rabbi Yehuda ben Beitera and others? So the key point is, if you go ahead and sell it to a non-Jew during the 5th hour, even you know that the non-Jew is not going to get rid of that at that time period before the holiday. Umutar be'ana'a. And then the Mishnah said that you can derive joy. Said Pshita. If we said that you can feed domesticated animal, you can sell it to a non-Jew, that is a two different type of driving joy, Rashi said. So that's clear, that's obvious. לא צריכה לשעות, לא צריכה, סליחה, שחרחו קודם זמנו. That he get rid of that chametz before the 6th hour. וכמשמלן כדרבה. And that's the Raivas according to the point of Ravada. Amar Rava, characho kodem zmano. If you get rid of that before the time, meaning before the 6 hours, so it's no longer can derive anything. And Sfat Emet explained this Rashi that no human is no longer good for human consumption. So they said mutar be'anaa afilu le'achar zmano. It's permitted to derive benefit from it even after its time. Why? Because since it no longer has the legal status of chametz, of leavened bread, so therefore it's no longer used for human consumption. So goodbye. The Ran said that as long as it's not totally dust and ashes, is a problem. But the key point is what happened after time. In other words, it's burned and now it's past the time. Can you derive any type of benefit? And it's a long discussion if that considering a food or not considering a food, etc. Avar zmano asur be'anato. But if time passes, we are forbidden to derive benefit from it. Pshita. What does Pshita mean? Obvious. Now I must say that Rashi did not have the girsa of Pshita. Rashi do not say it. Why? Because Rashi go here by Rabbi Yossi Aglili that we studied earlier. What Rabbi Yossi Aglili said, that chametz doing Pesach you can derive joy from it. That's his opinion, Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So if that's the case, you cannot say Rashi said the word Pshita. So he said, Lo tzricha leshaot derabanan. We're speaking here about rabbinic, about the 6th hour. So Rashi here used the word klomar, and he said leshaot derabanan, klomar hai זמנו, זמן אכילתו, משמע ואפילו שעה שישית שאין איסורו אלא מדרבנן, הווה אסור הב בהנאה. So I try to explain here based on the Tosfot in my book ביאורי כלומר ברש"י על הש"ס, that Rashi meant to say that the minutes you have the 6 hour, the minutes the 6 hours begin, you have here Isur the Rabbanan of Hana'ah. You have a rabbinic prohibition of deriving joy. So Rashi want to say, and that's the reason I think he used the word klomar, that the moments avar zmano, the time passed, it's not the time of shehiyat hachametz, that you're waiting for the chametz. It's the time of heter achila, that you're allowed to eat, and that's basically the maximum time. It's what? The end of the 5th hour, the early part of the 6th hour. Because the 6th hour itself, the prohibition apply not only for eating but also deriving benefit. And that's the reason why Rashi here used the word klomar, I think. The Amar Rav Gidel, Amar Rav Chia bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, או אמר רב, המקדש משש שעות ומעלה, אפילו בחיטי קורדנייתא, אין חוששים לקידושין. If you remember, we study it. You remember we talk a special kurdenaita, a special chitim, a special wheat, that from the mountains, we explain that that's the mountains close to Turkey, Ararat, etc., that they do not make them chametz easily. It takes much longer for those sweets to be chametz. So here they use a faraway example, but they wanted to crystallize, to clarify the situation. The basic book that I'm sharing with you, the explanation of this sugya, is the Ktsot HaChoshen. He explained this sugya beautifully, because he asked with this question the source of concept of Kiddushin, and that's based on the Gemarrah in the tractate Gittin. When someone, and we explained it earlier when we studied, I just want to refresh your memory. When Mr., let's call him Reuven, he went ahead and he tried to mekadesh, to consecrate it, Sarah, let's call her, as a wife. How he goes about to do it? If you remember, when we have the wedding ceremony, Mr. Reuven said to Sarah, his wife, Harei at mekudeshet li betaba'at zu kedat Moshe v'Yisrael. You are now consecrated to me with this ring according to the law of Moses and Israel. What does that mean to this very day when Reuven make it, that statement? The Gemarrah in Gittin tells us that he basically, in our simple language, he is acquiring, meaning he is consecrating her according to what? Rabbinic rules that follow the Torah laws. So now he needs to have the Kedat Moshe V'Yisrael, he needs the testification of the Bet Din, of the rabbinic court, to agree upon Ma'aseh Kiddushin, to make it happen. The Gemarrah tells us, and that's the reason why in the traditional Judaism we objected those form of Kiddushin by non-expert. They said, Kol she'eino baki betiv gitin v'kiddushin, al yehelo esek imahen. If Mr. Joe Schmo wants to take a couple and marry them, if he's not familiar, if he's not erudite with this, he should not get involved. Why? Because easily you can make a mistake and then you enter the domain of a big trouble for this couple. I give you extreme example that happened. It's just to illustrate an example. My wife's late grandfather, Rabbi Haitan, he was the chief rabbi of Chel Hayam, of Israeli Navy, for many years. I have the privilege and the honor to know him for, if I'm not mistaken, a little more than a decade. He told me once, he had the privilege, he was serving with the late Rabbi Goren, who was the chief rabbi of the IDF, 3 generations. sometimes. In other words, he wed one generation, the children and the grandchildren. So he said one time in a secular kibbutz, he officiated a wedding, and this is a serious business now. And especially in that generation, they belittle all this religious rabbinic ceremony. They don't know much involved. So he married a couple, and then he stayed, you know, for a little bit. Many times the rabbi is staying just to give a good feeling for the family. Even they don't eat always, they don't know so much with kashrut, etc. They maybe drink water, they stay there, so it's a good feeling. The rabbi is not just officiating and walk out. When they have the party, he stay. So he was sitting there, and he noticed something very weird. That the bride is dancing with a man. You know, unfortunately, they don't have a proper separation in many of those secular weddings. And that man is not the guy he married, Rabbi Heitner, Rabbi Etan. So he went ahead and he pulled out the bride. And he said, I need to talk to you for a second. And he said, I noticed in the past, whatever it is, let's say 20 minutes, you're dancing with someone. Is this your brother, your friend? Who is this guy that you're dancing? She said, that's my husband. So Rabbi Heitner said, excuse me, but this is not the man I married you. She said, what do you mean? And guess what happened? The fellow that want Rabbi Heitner to marry went about an hour before the wedding in a kibbutz. You know, in a kibbutz they are like, everybody does everything. And he went to one of his friends and he said to his friend, let's call him Shimon, this is Reuben. He said to Shimon, these rabbis, they have that time of ceremony, I don't have time for that because I need to feed the cows, I need to take the milk. So you go and play that ceremony, I'll be back for the party. And what happened is, he went ahead and he basically married under the chuppah his friend. And then when this guy Reuben finished taking the milk from those cows, he is back. So you have no choice and need to take them to the office and tell them, look, you are now legally by Torah law marry this guy, you don't marry Reuben. And he needs to go to the process of divorcing her, meaning his friend needs to divorce her, and then you need to make another separate ceremony with the minyan to marry her to the right guy. Just to give you a small example of people who have the chutzpah, the audacity to be involved with this without having the proper knowledge, and they are in a heavy violation of Torah laws. Those people who call themselves rabbi or whatever it is, and they have no clue in the real meaning of they are doing so. I go for the next step to tell you that unfortunately one of the reasons that you see the Israeli rabbis are so much in objections of non-recognized rabbis' weddings, etc., it's because of these issues, because you have a non-halachically correct form of wedding, and then you have this woman go to a civil divorce without a get, dating and marrying a fellow Jew, and have children who are basically hold mamzerut. And that's the key point, that they have the traditional Judaism strong objections to this type of non-halachic form of wedding, because it's followed the next step, which is non-halachic any form of divorce. Civil divorce is not halachic divorce. As long as there's no get, she is considering by halacha a married woman, and therefore the children for the second husband, etc., are not legitimate by Torah law. So you basically carry here a tremendous crisis for the next generation if you're involved with this and you don't know what you're doing. Back to our subject. So the K'tzot HaChoshen said the source of the Isurei Hanaha, of deriving joy, deriving benefit, it's the idea of Gmirut Hadat. Rashi tells us here that Isha need to have Gmirut Hadat. She needs to totally agree upon the Kiddushin. She needs to have a mental capacity. She needs to understand what's involved with this, and she needs to accept this idea of being consecrated according to halacha. So you have here which called Tartei de Rabbanan. That's what the Ktsot HaChoshen understand from Rashi, that said that Adatei de Rabbanan, with the consent of Kedat Moshe v'Yisrael, according to the law of Moses of Israel, you have this Ma'aseh Kiddushin. So Rabbi Shimon Shkop here go further and said, what did Rashi tells us? That you have Chad de Rabbanan, you have one point is, which is the beginning of the 6 hours. So what happened here? So you have two avenues. We have one Rashi, and you have the Rabbeinu Tam in the Tosfot, that said at the beginning of the 7 hours. So he said, in a Shara Yoshua, Rabbi Shimon Shkop said here, that if Avar Zmano Midrabanan, if he passed the time by the rabbinic, so you are forbidden to derive joy. So now you take this chitei kudenaita, you take here this wheat, and you make her consecrate, because when you take the ring has value. Remember that when we have the wedding, the rabbi is lifted up the ring and says, oh, how much you think it's cost? Right. And it sounds like he's joking, but the key point is it has to have values. So since you take this chitei kudenaita and he's in the hour or question of violation, therefore you don't have ein chosheshin lekiddushin. You do not say that we are not consecrated, or that this is betrothal valid. Why? Because chametz asur be'anah, the chametz is forbidden to derive joy when at the early part of the 6th hour. Next part of the Mishnah said, Velo yasik bo tanur vechirayim. One may not even light an oven or stove with leavened bread once it becomes prohibited. So the Gemara asks, Pshita, you just said avar zmano asur b'anah, past the time you're forbidden to derive joy. Lo tzricha ela leRabbi Yehuda de'amar en biur chametz el asrifa. You have to go by the Rabbi Yehuda that said that the burning of chametz apply what? Of physical burning. Getting rid of chametz is physical initiating of burning the chametz. Sal kadata chamina. You may enter in your mind, ho'il ve'amar Rabbi Yehuda mitzvato bisreifa behadig de kasarif lei litnehei minei. So you may say that when you are burning it, he can derive benefit, which means, since Rabbi Yehuda said that the only bi'ur chametz has to have the acting of burning it, so, and since we said that anything that was burned, the ashes is allowed, that's the Gemarrah in Trumura 34 explained, so you can say that you can derive some joy, some type of hana'ah, while is the period of burning. But since you go, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, but if you go by the sages that said that you can burn, you can get rid of that in any form, so that's involved with Isurei Hana'ah, that the afar, the ashes, is forbidden. So therefore the Tosfot said, and Maram Chelwa said too, that you cannot, by the sages, derive any type of joy at that hour of burning. Kamash malan. So that's the reason why the Mishnah said that even at the time of burning it, you cannot derive any benefit, and this is big machloket rishonim, the Tosfot said, if it's a biblical or rabbinic, because Tosfot tells us here that there's a two type of kilui, two type of getting rid of. One, it's called nisrafin, by burning it. Number two, it's called nikbarim, by burying it. So based on this Gemarrah in Temura, so if you are burning it, so and then you bury it, so the basic question is if this is yatzai yedei chova or not yatzai yedei chova, if you fulfill the obligation or not. So now the Gemarrah tells us what's the source of the idea that the chametz is forbidden to derive any joy, any benefit. Amar Chizkiya, מניין לחמץ בפסח שאסור בהנאה? How do you know that חמץ, the leaven, during Pesach is forbidden to derive joy? שנאמר לא יאכל חמץ. The Torah said in Shmot, in Exodus 13, you should not eat חמץ. What is לא יאכל? לא יהיה בו היתר אכילה. So let's read here Rashi that said, מדקרינה לא יאכל, משמע לא יהיה בו היתר המביא לידי שום אכילה. וסתם הנאות לידי אכילה הם באות. And the usual manner of driving joy is coming for the term of eating it. שלוקח בדמים דבר מאכל, that you are purchased with cash, with money, something to eat. So you talk about איסור הנאה, meaning כל הנאה, any deriving of benefit. And now the Gemarrah said that that's applied to the מחלוקת of חזקיה and רבי אבאו. תמה דכתב רחמנה לא יאכל חמץ, לא כתב לא יאכל, אבל אמינא איסור אכילה משמע, איסור הנאה לא משמע. ופליגה דרבי אבאו, דאמר רבי אבאו, כל מקום שנאמר לא יאכל, לא תאכל, לא תאכלו, אחד איסור הנאה, אחד איסור אכילה ואחד איסור הנאה משמע, עד שיפרוד לך הכדור כדרך שפרט לך בנבלה. Beautiful. Here we have a klal, we have a principle. The principle is the machloket between Chizkiah and Rabbi Abahu. Is eating including deriving joy or not? Rabbi Abahu said if you're eating, that's apply also to deriving joy. Chizkiah said only when the pasuk used the term lo ye'achel. Lo ye'achel apply to two things, which is, help me, one is eating, second one is deriving
benefit,
joy. Now, Rabbi Abahu said everything is involved with hana'ah, with driving joy. So Tosfot tells us here, if someone eat chametz and Pesach, the Torah said v'nichreta, karet, that's all shall be cut. So Tosfot said in דיבור המתחיל כל מקום, ואם תאמר יהא נהנה מחמץ בפסח בכרת, דאכתיב כי כל אוכל חמץ ונכרתה, which means this according to Chizkiah only one that involved actively with eating or deriving joy, that's applied to ונכרתה. Now he said here the bai ma'ika ben Chizkiah Rabbi Abahu. What's the difference, the real difference between Chizkiah and Rabbi Abahu? Le'imadi kabena yuha v'omerid lo yachel v'lo tachel elfinan milot tochlu, which apply to both. Aval ki kol ochel lo yalfinan milot tochlu. There's two different psukim. If you derive any joy on Pesach, so according to that, lo chayav karet. You don't have this idea of karet, of that social cut. According to Rabbi Abahu, chayav. But this is something that we'll study in the future. The big conclusion of the machloket between Chizkiah and Rabbi Abahu, because the Gemarrah did not drive that way later. The Tanya. לא תאכלו כל נבלה לגר אשר ברשעך תתננה ואכלה ומחול תמכור לנוכרי. So they said, the Torah said in Deuteronomy 14, you shall not eat any unslaughtered animal. You may give it to a resident alien or within your gate. You may eat it, or you may sell it to a foreigner, for you are a sacred people to the Lord your God. So what does that mean? אין לי אלא בנתינה ולנוכרי לגר ובנתינה לנוכרי במחירה. Either you give it to a ger or you sell it to a non-Jew. לגר במחירה מניין, תלמוד לומר לגר אשר בשחירה תתננה או מחור, because the Torah said it clearly. לנוכרי בנתינה מניין, תלמוד לומר תתננה ואכלה או מחור לנוכרי. So because you say you may eat it or you may sell it to a foreigner. בנמצאת אומר, so you derive from that, אחד גר ואחד נוכרי, בין במחירה בין מדינה דברי רבי מאיר. Regardless if it's a resident alien or a non-Jew, you can go ahead both through giving or through selling. That's the Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda אומר, דברים ככתבם, you go by the literal sense of the text. לגר בנתינה ולנוכרי במחירה. You go by a resident alien by giving, and for non-Jew, you're going by selling. my Tama de Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason that Rabbi Yehuda go by literal text? The Isal Kadat Tachkida Amar Rabbi Meir. If you go by the way that Rabbi Meir said, Lichtov Rachmana Lager Asher Bishrecha Titnena V'Achala U'Machol Anochi. So they use the word Vav Achibur or Lamali. Why the Torah use the option or meaning lechalek, to divide. Shma mina lidvarim kichtavam. You have to go by the literal text that understood the way that it's written. Rabbi Meir, how he respond? He said, or leakdim netina leger lemcha b'nochi. That you have to prioritize. The best way is to give it to a resident alien. If by force of circumstance you can, then you sell it to an Jew. Rabbi Yehuda halot tzarich kra, kivan deger אתה מצווה לאחיותו, ונוכרי אתה מצווה לאחיותו. You have the obligation only to sustain a resident alien. Svarau, so you have to say that it's a logical inference. בישלמה לרבי מאיר אמר אחד גר ואחד נוכרי בין במכירה בין בנתינה. So we understand according to Rabbi Meir that it's applied either to resident alien, regardless to selling or giving. בדיסטריך קרא למישרה נבלה בהנאה, because the Torah allow נבלה to derive joy. כל איסורים שבתורה אסורים בין באכילה בין בהנאה. So you derive from that all the prohibition, both eating and derived benefit, apply to both. אלא לרבי יהודה אמר לדברים ככתבם ודעתה. If you go by Rabbi Yehuda said that that's by literal sense, הכל איסורים שבתורה מנהלי לאסורים בהנאה. How do you know that all the biblical prohibition, it's also applied to prohibition to drive benefit as well? So the Gemarrah responds, נפקא ליה לכלב תשליכון אותו, because the Torah said clearly in the book of Exodus chapter 12, they said, and you shall be sacred man to me, therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn of beasts in the field, you shall cast it to the dog. So you derive from that treifa applied to domesticated animal or non-domesticated. So you can derive joy by giving to your animal. Last few lines of 22. אותו אתה משליך לכלב, אתה משליך לכלב כל איסורים שבתורה. You can derive to the dog that part, to derive joy, but not all the other prohibition which is applied to like treifa. That's Rashi said. ורבי מאיר, אותו אתה משליך לכלב, אתה משליך לכלב כל איש נשתחו בעלך. You can give to a dog that food, but you don't give a non-sacred food that was slaughtered in the temple courtyard to a dog, because you are forbidden to derive benefit from that. Ve'idach, so how Rabbi Yehuda responds to that? He says, he says that's not biblical. When you speak about the animal that was slaughtered in the courtyard, it's not Torah law, and therefore, since it's not Torah law, it's applied to the machloket, which we don't have time now. It's in Gemarrah in Kedushin Nunchet 58. So the Rashi said that Isu Anaa, it's not biblical, but Shchitat Ba'azara, it's a biblical, and the Shut Beit HaLevi have a lot of discussion here, but in short we go now to practical halachot. First, the Shulchan Aruch Orachaim 443, that's practical halachot. On Pesach Eve, one may sell his leavened bread or feed it to an animal even during the 5th hour of the day, when he may not eat it himself. On the contrary, one may watch the animal to ensure that it does not hide any leavened bread, and one must remove whatever is left over. So how you actively burn the chametz? This is based on the Ramah, Shulchan Aruch Orachaim 445. One may remove leavened bread in numerous ways, like burning it, crumbling it into the wind, or the way that the Rambam follows, it says casting it in the sea. If the bread is hard, you should crumble it before casting it to the sea. The common practice is to burn one's leavened bread, out of concern for those rabbis who accept the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that's the only way Rabbi Yehuda accepted. Now, mechirat chametz, which is a long subject, the idea of selling the chametz, I give you just the abbreviation. Again, the same spot in the code. It is permitted to sell one's leavened bread to a non-Jew before Pesach, even if he knows that it will remain in the possession of the non-Jew during the Pesach festival. That's the Beit Hillel we follow. Chametz shecharacho, if leavened bread was a period of time, it is, follow the Tosfot, it is prohibited to extend it to dog, even to that the dog will not eat it. It's permitted to derive benefit from it on Passover, because if even the dog cannot eat it, you can go ahead. It's also sha'od Rabbanan. We explain that hours go by the Torah law, one may not benefit from leavened bread on Pesach Eve from the end of the 6th hour. By the rabbinic law, one may not benefit from leavened bread from the beginning of the 6th hour, not from the end. We talk about Isurei Hana'ah. It is prohibited by Torah law to derive benefit from leavened bread during Passover. That's the famous Rambam, Hilchot Chametz U'Matzah, chapter 1. And whatever the Rambam said, the Torah said you shall not eat, and uses a similar expression, it means that one may not neither eat nor benefit from the prohibition item unless the verse explicitly permits deriving benefit. So one may give an animal carcass to a resident alien as a gift. However, we're not selling it to a non-Jew. And again, we said that all of this prohibition, when it's come to this sensitive time, we always have to go by the luach, the way that the luach in our current times give us the time frame, and it's always better to do it a little earlier than the time, so we don't enter to the sfekot the Rabbanan, the issues of rabbinic prohibitions.